Ben, you ready to go? Do you want me to do a countdown? Yeah, so if we say do from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you're live, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this district planning meeting, today the 4th of September 2024. First of all, may I apologise for the late start. I'm afraid we had some technical issues. My name's Councillor Maddie Thompson. I'm the chairman of this committee. Members, we're streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to being recorded. During each item, please put your hand up to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Could I ask members to avoid approaching the top table, as this can create interference with the cameras and live stream, as if we hadn't already had enough. Please note that the YouTube live stream sound recording is dependent on the correct use of microphones. Therefore, can I ask that when invited to speak, you remember to turn on your microphone and turn it off when finished. Please reference the page or paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers, and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. We do not have any fire alarm testing scheduled for today. If you hear the alarm, please exit using either of the two marked fire escape routes. Once out of the building, please proceed to the designated muster point located on the grass verge by the police station entrance. Members, this is the first district planning with the constitutional break in place. This means that should members be minded, and that's critical wording, members be minded to overturn an officer recommendation for approval, the matter must be deferred to a further meeting for discussions to take place with officers. So this means we can only be minded to refuse. We can't actually deal with a proposal to refuse an application. Councillor Paula Spenceley is sitting beside me. She's kindly agreed to help me as a substitute vice chairman in the absence of the actual vice chairman, Councillor Nick Spenceley. Does anyone object to her helping me? Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and thank you, Councillor Spenceley. So, Ms Bird, can we have the apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chairman, and apologies for the issues earlier on. Apologies have been received from Councillor Durham, Councillor Haywood, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Label, Councillor Miller, Councillor Spenceley and Councillor White. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Item 3 is the minutes. Oh,
Chairman, could I just offer apologies for Councillor Bown, who may be a little late.
Thank you, Councillor Pratt. Appreciate that. Item 3, the minutes. It's recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of April are approved as a true and accurate record. They're found on pages 7 to 12. May I take them as read, members? Sorry, Councillor Morgan.
Sorry, Madam Chairman. I suspect that Councillor Fluker may have had some contribution to the putting together of these minutes, as yet again I appear to have been mistaken for my colleague Councillor Morley, who is shown as having taken part in the meeting and also having given his apologies. I have checked my notes and I was here. Okay. So perhaps that could be right. Thank you.
Thank you. Have you got that, Ms Bird? Have you got that, Ms Bird?
Chairman, yes.
Lovely, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. So, well, that deals with any matters of accuracy. Are there any other matters of accuracy?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It says item 715, disclose your interest if my surname could have an extra L added to it.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll deal with that and try and remember that. Okay, so I so propose. Is that seconded? Councillor Neal, thank you. Can we agree those by assent, members? Thank you very much. Right. Item 4 is declarations of interest. I have to read this part. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraph 9 and appendix B of the Code of Conduct for Members. Members are reminded they're also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware, should the need arise through the meeting. Members, anyone? Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I've been advised that I should disclose that I have got a pecuniary interest because I live opposite the Burnham one. I find this a little bit strange in the fact that the development is actually taking place further down, and as somebody's actually said to me tonight, it's most probably increased the value of my house by the number of houses on that estate anyway. But just to be safe, so I'm not reported for any interest, I will be leaving the chamber. I really don't want to, because I think it's an infringement of my democratic right to represent my residents, but rather than risk being reported, I will be leaving the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. Councillor Fluker.
It's quite an interesting point that Councillor Stamp raises, because there was a paper that was disseminated which revolves around whether or not it affects you any more or less than a member of the public who lives in your ward. And the whole idea of that was to prevent a member being disenfranchised for taking part in a debate. So I can see Councillor Mrs. Spenceley nodding, but I really do think we should just perhaps recheck that, because the whole idea of it is that you're here to represent the people in your ward, and you can quite easily become disenfranchised over this. And that's why I think the whole terms around declaring interests were changed early part of last year, but certainly before May, when the new administration came to this council. And I think it does need checking.
I think it does. Councillor Spenceley.
You're completely correct, Councillor Fluker. I was actually advised, because I live directly opposite Site 2D, so I wouldn't be able to vote if this were the case on anything on the North Heybridge Garden suburb, which would be utterly bizarre as the ward member. So, and I was told that if it affects, other residents in your ward, then in a similar way that you shouldn't be excluded from voting. So.
It certainly wants clarification. Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree, but I think we do remember an instance where a member was reported and did get served a sanction from the Standards Committee on a very similar issue in 2019, I think it was. And I have spoken to the monitoring officer or liaised with the monitoring officer, and I will butt out on this one, but hopefully next one members may choose to send an email to the monitoring officer to represent their own areas, because I do feel it is unfair. This development is further down the track and it's nowhere near where my house is. At least, I don't know how many yards it is. I walk the dog there every day anyway, and it goes right down the bottom. So on this occasion, I will be leaving the chamber just for my own benefit, because I don't want reporting to what happened to another member before on this council. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bassinger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In fact, I was that councillor that was reported for exactly this particular thing. And I think Councillor Stamp is very well advised on her own behalf to leave the chamber, because, again, I think she's putting herself in a position where she could be reported. And until clarity is reached, for her own protection, I would advise that.
We are now dealing with a different code of conduct from the one that was that has changed, and
But I said
I am going to go, but it is important this is debated.
it certainly is. I believe your committee is the place to do that. I understand, it's entirely your decision, and I completely understand. Well, it's your decision whether to take the advice or not. Councillor Spenceley, was that what you wanted to say?
Yes, I was just going to say it did change. We did receive that advice after the new code of conduct came in after 2019, so it was in 2022. So, but I
Okay. So moving on, we have item 5. That's our first planning application, land south of Brent Way and off Endeavour Way and Burnham on Crouch. So we have Mrs. Page in the chamber who is presenting. While I'm introducing, we have Mr. Johnson next to me, he's Head of Development Management. And we have Miss Bird clerking the meeting. Thank you, Mrs. Page.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. This is a full planning application for the construction of 63 dwellings with associated works, including open space, access, car parking and cycle provision, sustainable urban drainage and infrastructure, and it's land south of Brent Way and off Endeavour Way, Burnham on Crouch. Here's a location plan and aerial photograph. The site is located to the northwest of Burnham on Crouch. The site is to the south of the existing Barrett David Wilson Homes development, which you can see here on the aerial photograph. It's known as Corinthian Place. The application site itself, which I've crudely drawn on here in orange to try and replicate what's on the location plan, is off Endeavour Way, which comes off the B1010, and this access point here comes off Brent Way, which is part of the existing development. So the northern boundary of the site is formed by the existing Barrett David Wilson development and associated open space. To the east of the site here, you can see on the aerial photograph, the site is bound by Springfield Industrial Estate. There is a railway line to the south beyond the application site, and agricultural land to the west, including the recently opened allotments. I've included a drone image here just to sort of set the scene a little bit further, so you can see the site here orientated slightly differently here, so we're looking from a different angle. So the site here, the existing Barrett David Wilson development, and you can see how the site sits in relation to wider residential development within Burnham on Crouch and the employment land. I've included this plan here just to set the scene a little bit more in terms of the local development plan and policy implications. So the site is within a wider parcel of land within the strategic site allocated for housing and employment space under policies S2 and E1 of the local development plan. So this left-hand side image is the application site, and again I've tried to crudely draw on how that relates to sort of the allocation. So the orange where my cursor is hovering is part of the residential allocation here, and the rest of the site, sort of roughly this area, is part of the employment land. So as set out within the committee report, S2I does not limit the residential provision to 180 dwellings, and officers are content that the development would not prejudice the delivery of the allocation and consider that there is sufficient infrastructure capacity to accommodate the development. In terms of the employment implications, the site is allocated for commercial use, for light industrial, general industrial, storage and distribution uses, though this application would only result in the loss of the former B1 use, so now EG within a more recent use class. The application has been submitted with detailed marketing evidence and reference to the Council's employment land and premises study. So this latest study was commissioned by the Council and will form part of the emerging local plan. It was issued and published earlier on this year. This document indicates that the district has a very localised office market with limited supply and demand. Officers consider that the area of land could be released for residential development, as it would not affect the remainder of the employment site, as seen here, which would still be available and continues to be marketed for B2 and B8 uses. Turning to the site plan now, the site would have two vehicular access points. So where my cursor is hovering now would be one of the accesses from Endeavour Way. This would serve 38 of the dwellings to the west-hand side of the site. And there would be a further access here of Brent Way to the eastern side, and this access here would serve 20 dwellings. The general layout of development in terms of road hierarchy, density and the grain of development follows the approach to the development to the north. In terms of sort of detailed layouts, there would be active frontages along the highways and the public open spaces. So this existing linear parcel of open space to the north, you can see dwellings fronting out onto it here. And we'll see that later on in some of the street scenes. And again to the south, dwellings fronting onto the open space. High quality brick walls are located where the rear or flank of dwellings face out onto the open space or the highway, and this is a further factor that contributes to a high quality development. So again, these dwellings here that have a relationship with the open space would have a brick wall as their boundary treatment. Equally, these dwellings here, where they front onto some public open space, equally would have a brick wall, as would all of these turning units. That is supported by officers. The open space, as I've said, existing open space to the north, but the majority would be provided here to the southwest of the site. Officers are content with this layout, and which would also assist in the development appearing more open with an increased separation distance to the commercial to the south. In terms of the proposed tenure, 25 of the 63 units would be delivered as affordable. Officers are content with the distribution across the site, so generally sort of within this area here and then another parcel to the west. The development would deliver 6 shared ownership units consisting of 2 two-bed dwellings and 3 three-bed dwellings, and the rented units equate to 19 units. Members will have seen a member update which sets out an update on the mix, and I'll include this on a later slide. Turning to some street scenes now. In design terms, the majority of the development would be 2-storey in scale, although there are 7 bungalows across the site. This AA street scene here, which is annotated on the site plan, so it's this eastern access in. So as you're looking on the right-hand side here where my cursor is, this is the turning unit as you would enter into the site. You can see the active fenestration to the side and the brick wall here. Again, you can see these two bungalows. These are 2 of the affordable units. And in fact, these 5 units here are all affordable, and these would be the market. So this street scene is quite helpful in demonstrating that the affordable housing would be tenure blind. BB street scene is this elevation here where my cursor is and annotated on this plan. It's these dwellings here, 2-storey in scale, that front onto the northern open space. Again, just quite helpful really in terms of showing that mix of materials proposed. And street scene CC here, which is your longer street scene to the south, again shows these are the affordable, and then the rest of the market. So market on your left, and then as you sort of head towards the right of this image are some of the affordable units, again showing sort of the scale of development proposed and sort of how the mix of materials works. I've included some CGIs here because I think they're just helpful really in demonstrating how the development would appear. So again, these are some of the market houses fronting onto that open space. So we saw them in a street scene a little while ago. So it demonstrates sort of the materials here. So red brick, buff brick, render are the elevational treatments, and then a tile and a slate roof. This CGI image here is looking north now, so back up the one of the entrances into the site. So these 2 units here that flank this road are 2 of the affordable units, so they're 3-bed, 6-person units that are being proposed. Again, you can see the similar approach in terms of the stone seals and the design features, so they would appear tenure blind. And again, here, where the arrow is pointing are the 3 market bungalows that front onto the open space. So they front onto, or would face onto, the backs of the existing bungalows in the existing development to the north, again, showing sort of the bay window features and sort of that mix of materials. I've included here some photographs of the existing dwellings on the adjacent Barrett David Wilson site, just to show how the development sort of does really replicate and follow through in terms of that design approach. So although there's, in this image here, we can see some black boarding, which there would not be on the development site, the similar approach in terms of buff and red bricks. You can see these bungalows here, which very much replicate what's being proposed on the application site in front of us today, and the use of stone seals. Landscape master plan. This shows how the layout of the open space has been integrated into the design of the development proposals. It promotes pedestrian movements throughout the site and provides informal areas for recreation. The development would be laid out with informal paths, grass, wildflower grassland, native hedge planting and trees. And again, you can see here some of the additional street trees that have been incorporated through discussion with officers. Block paving would be laid to all of the off-street parking areas, and then otherwise tarmac used on the internal roads. Now, there is an update that's been circulated to members which refers primarily to the housing mix. So the committee report discusses compliance with the local housing needs assessment, but it doesn't break down within the committee report the difference between the market and the affordable housing. So hopefully this table will clarify matters. So it breaks it down in terms of market, rented and shared ownership. So the first column, or the first line here, is what the local housing needs assessment requires, and underneath it is the number proposed and how that works as a percentage. So for the market housing, there is an over provision of 3 and 4 bed units. We can see that here. So 52.6% of the market houses would be 3-bed and 31.6% would be 4-bed. So there is the over provision of those, but in actual numbers, it equates to an over provision of 1 3-bed unit and 3 4-bed units. And so whilst officers note that there would be some conflict with the local housing needs assessment, they do not consider it would be harmful. In terms of the rented provision here, so the affordable housing rented, There is a small over provision here, as we can see, 42.1% in terms of one bed units, but in actual terms it relates to an over provision of just one unit. So in terms of this, the developer has been working with the Council Strategic Housing Services and have amended the development to reflect the aspirations of the Council's housing section. So support is given to the provision of the 4 one-bed rented bungalows, which are now being provided with wet rooms and showers for older people. And in addition, the developer has been willing to increase the size of the 3-bed units to 3-bed 6-person houses, which would meet the need of larger families. So the Housing Services Department are happy with that provision. In terms of the shared ownership, we can see that those 6 units, so 3 2-beds, 3 3-beds, does also, there is some conflict with the local housing needs figure, but again, it's considered that the applicant would be unable to offer any 4-bed units as they wouldn't be affordable or acceptable to the housing associations, and equally it's considered 1-beds couldn't be provided because they would have concerns with regards to management and service charges, with both of those mixes being within one block. So overall, in regards to affordable housing provision, they are still providing a mix of 75% rented and 25% shared ownership, which is policy compliant, and officers support the housing mix set out. Also not included on this slide, but included with the member update, there was a change to one of the plan numbers. So members would just note that in terms of that, and it's just a revision A to one of the plans. So turning now to the summary and the planning balance. The adverse impacts relate to the principle of development and the application being contrary to the development plan. So as members will be aware, the application site is located within designated employment land. However, officers have reviewed the supporting marketing reports and looked at Maldon District Council's employment land and premises study, which, as I set out, has recently been published this year to inform the local plan. And that demonstrates that there is a localised office market with limited supply and demand, and officers are content that the release of this land for residential would not affect the remainder of the employment allocation, but it does weigh against the proposal in that planning balance. In terms of the public benefits, the application would result in the delivery of market and affordable housing, so 63 dwellings, 25 of which are affordable and within a variety of sizes and types. So limited weight given to the market dwellings, but moderate weight can be attributed to the affordable housing delivery. Other public benefits relate to social and economic benefits, and the development would deliver biodiversity net gain. So as set out here, there'd be just over 19% increase in habitat units to be secured through an appropriate mechanism. So in conclusion, having considered the benefits that would arise from the proposal and weighing this against the harms, which relate to the conflict with the development plan, it's considered that the significant benefits would outweigh any harm, and these benefits would amount to material considerations of weight that would indicate that planning permission could be granted not in accordance with the development plan. And our recommendation this evening is that planning permission be granted, subject to the applicant entering into a legal agreement pursuant to section 106 and subject to the conditions as set out, including that revision to plan number. Thank you, that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you. So we have public participation now. We have the applicant, Mr. Halpin, to speak. If you'd like to come forward, so find an empty chair. And you can get the timer up, please. Sorry. Just give us a moment. Yes, here we go. There's the timer. So you have 2 minutes to speak precisely. I am very exact, I'm afraid.
That's no problem.
Make yourself comfortable.
Good evening, and thank you, Madam Chair, members. My name is Ray Houghton. I'm the Head of Planning at Barrett David Wilson, based in Chelmsford. Quinton Place has been one of our most successful developments. We've already delivered 247 homes, including 86, with 37 more homes, of which 13 are under construction. To date, we've also contributed over £3 million in Section 106 agreements to education, healthcare, youth facilities, libraries and highway improvements. The application site is within a strategic allocation for a minimum of 180 dwellings and benefits from an extant planning permission. The development has been directly informed by the pre-application discussions, including with the Town Council, and designed to form a seamless part of the existing development in terms of density, house types, materials and landscaping. We're pleased officers recognise that much needed homes and affordable homes creates the public benefits proposed in comparison, say, to the site's vacant allocation for employment purposes. There's a demonstrable lack of office accommodation, need for office accommodation, particularly given the changing work practices over the last 5 years. Over 3 hectares of the allocated employment land will remain for light industrial uses, for which we consider there is a demand. The development will provide the desired mix of homes to address the greatest local need, including 25 affordable homes, particularly for older persons, including 7 bungalows, of which 4 will be equipped for disabled occupants, including the provision of wet rooms. As reported, there will be a 19% increase in biodiversity with EV charging points and secure cycle storage to all properties. I respectfully ask members to resolve to grant planning permission this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. So, members. Councillor Fluker first.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll give way to anybody. Chairman, obviously this site has evolved over a number of years, and as the officer pointed out, it was an allocation for employment land. But clearly, I think beyond reasonable doubt, that's now been demonstrated it's not required. So that argument's been lost elsewhere. I'm always interested to look at the applicants' palettes, and you know, David Wilson Homes palette. You know, in many ways, it doesn't reflect our own design guide, but the officers haven't picked up on that, and nor has the owner, I'll refer to as of the design guide. So I think we have to accept that. And I think we also have to accept that David Wilson Homes have delivered in Southminster using the same palette, and it's actually resulted in quite an attractive estate. And this one is back from the road. So that's something that concerns me, but I think if the officers are happy with that, and I think I have to say this because I always moan about CGIs because they never include cars. So I'd like to commend David Wilson Homes for not only bringing forward their CGIs, but they've actually got a few cars in them. Likewise, the drone one, Chairman, but I think the drone one may well be an artistic rendering. Something, Chairman, I've never seen before is condition number 26. I don't know if this is a new type of condition. This is to do with noise, I'm going to say attenuation, but probably reduction. So the houses that are particularly close to the industrial units, there's a condition in them to make sure that they're protected under BS 8233 of 2014, Chairman. Chairman, that said, I can't really see any reason to refuse this application. I would therefore propose, Chairman, that we approve the application. Thank you.
Is that seconded? That's Councillor Morley seconding. Thank you. Councillor Fitton.
Thank you, Chair. I wouldn't disagree with Councillor Fluker that the development is sound in principle. Where I do have major concerns is how we're deciding what the market housing mix should be for these developments. I understand the officers saying it's a nominal change from what's required, but at the end of the day, we have a local housing need assessment that's produced to meet the need of all residents of the district. And the starting point for building houses is to meet the needs of residents in the first instance. And from that, we come up with a calculation that is done by a professional to ascertain the mix of housing that we need to meet those needs. From that, those needs that can't be met because they can't afford properties, we decide to build affordable housing. Now, where I have the problem is that this is one instance, but I've looked back at developments over a period of time. And if I look at Latchington, whereas I'd be arguing that probably we should be meeting 10% one beds and 35% two beds, given our affordability ratio, that development is only 22%. When I look back over the last 10 years in development in the district, and I look at the median lower quartile earnings of residents, only 20 properties have been built that they could afford. 20. So, I mean, I understand from a developer perspective why they want the developments they want, What I don't understand is how we're allowing these developers to come forward with such small provision of market housing, given the reason we're developing in the first place is to meet the need of those that need market housing. And these are not established residents that have property. These are new entrants to the market. So most of those are not going to be on median wage. They're going to be on lower quartile wage. So when I look at the actual, I thought I'll have a look at the last time that we delivered a flat in the district. New property, year end September 2022. So I thought I'll have a look at terraced housing, see how we're doing it, because these are the most two affordable principal types. Where's that? Year end March 2022. So I don't really understand how if we keep doing what we're doing, that we're going to help people get onto the ladder of the market. They're going to have no choice but to go into rental accommodation. And because there is no competition in the smaller property sector, that rent is whatever the people want to charge. So I really do think we need to properly consider our housing strategy and come up with a strategy that actually meets the needs of all people. Because we seem very focused on affordable housing, which I'm totally behind, but it shouldn't be in at the cost of everybody else. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, could I forget your name, sorry.
Lisa Page.
Lisa, thank you. Would you be able to just go back to the drone photo for me, please? Thank you very much. Just for information, members, this doesn't actually fully show the extent of the development. This ploughed field at the top here is currently being built on. That's part of the development. And there is a further development, I believe, just somewhere over there. So although these look like empty fields now, they're not. They're more houses in this development. So just so you get an accurate picture of what we're looking at. I'm disappointed, of course I am, because yet again, Burnham is losing facilities, things we might have, and we're getting more houses. I must thank the developers for handing over the allotments, though. We're very grateful for that, and you know we are starting to see the benefits of the development we've had. I know we're going to have to accept this, and I understand the reasons why, despite my serious misgivings. I hope that the developers will come up with some nice goodies for the town in you know, I really do. Because, you know, Section 106, we'll have that, and we're grateful for, you know, the Section 106 benefits we've had. But, yeah, we're just getting more and more and more and more housing piled on us. We know that throwing money at the doctor's surgery isn't the solution, because we've nowhere to put, and we've got nowhere to expand to. So that, you know, it says this is being mitigated. No, it isn't really. It's just throwing money at a problem that you can't actually spend to resolve that problem. But we are where we are. We know what the legislation says, and not that we can do really. It's there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Spenceley.
So I just would like to back up Councillor Fittock's point. I think we do have to be mindful going forward that we're failing to provide the lower cost market housing that people need who live in this district to get their foot on the bottom of the ladder. It's as simple as that. We're not building enough 1 and 2 bedroom market houses, and we've concentrated much more on achieving those through affordable housing. And in the end, we're forcing a situation where we'll have more and more people in affordable housing to start with. And then we all know that once they've missed that rung on the bottom of the ladder, that what we're encouraging is more and more of a problem down the line. And I don't think we can just keep saying, well, it's only 1 or 2 and we're just adjusting it a little bit. It's either a policy or it's not. And I think we need to learn to stick to it. I agree we're likely going to have to pass this, but we should be expecting more in terms of our negotiations with developers to get what our policy demands. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Well, we have a proposal on the table duly seconded to approve the recommendation. Can I take a show of hands on agreement with that, please? And those against? Thank you. So that application is passed. Thank you. Moving on, we have item. Oh, yes, please. Please, thank you. I'm just saying it's one or two, it's one or two. No, then we'll have the policy if we're not going to stick to it. Okay, members. Now that Councillor Stamp is back, we can move on to the next item, which is land southwest of the Warren, Hackmans Lane, Purleigh. The officer presenting is Ms Page again. And then we have two members of the public to speak after that.
Thank you very much. This is a full planning application, reference 24/00366, and it's for a proposed solar farm together with substation, ancillary buildings, structures, landscaping, emergency lighting and access, and it's land southwest of the Warren, Hackmans Lane in Purleigh. Here's the application site, so location plan on the left-hand side, and again, I've sort of crudely indicated within sort of an aerial image of how that site plan sort of would fall on the site. So the site occupies an area of approximately 33 hectares and is made up of agricultural land. The site lies predominantly in Maldon district. However, as set out in the committee report, the access lies in the administrative area of Chelmsford City Council. On the left-hand side here, on the location plan, you can see that the site lies to the south of Cox Clark. Hackmans Lane here lies to the east, where there is a number of commercial and residential units, including this offshoot here where my cursor is, where it's annotated the crib. So members will recall, and I'll cover this later in the report, that this was specifically referenced, these dwellings here, in terms of an earlier reason for refusal on another solar farm application on the site. The far northern parcel of the site lies within flood zone 2 and 3, and you can see here how the site wrapped around Great Wood, which is an ancient woodland and local wildlife site. So you can see it on the location plan, and again, in terms of the aerial photograph, it's this area here. Cankwood, which is shown again annotated on the location plan, lies to the south of the site. This is also an ancient woodland and local wildlife site, but it lies outside of the application site and doesn't actually adjoin the site boundary. To the east, which again is annotated by a green line, is a public right-of-way that runs the entire length of that eastern boundary. There's also a further public right-of-way that runs through the centre of the site. So it's sort of this northern, where my cursor is, so to the north of the application site, it sort of carries on along that eastern boundary here, crosses the site around the ancient woodland, follows it down to the west, and then exits on the access track. In terms of the site layout, the application seeks full permission for the erection of a solar voltaic array, commonly referred to as a solar farm, with a generating capacity of 25 megawatts. So you can see here that the site layout broadly comprises 5 development parcels, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and this 5. Access to the site would be from a single priority junction from Crows Lane on the access track here. I've included here a comparison between the proposed development and the refused application that members will recall came to a recent committee under 23/00807 FULM. So that earlier application was refused for the same site area for a solar farm, and it was refused in terms of harm including that to neighbours to the northeast of the site on Hackmans Lane. So these dwellings, where my cursor is here, that were shown on the earlier location plan. So that refused application is currently at appeal, and it's due to be determined via a public inquiry. So this current application has been submitted following that refusal, and seeks to overcome the previous reasons for refusal. So the changes within this application in front of you today primarily relates to this parcel 5. So you can see the differences here in terms of there's a reduction in the amount of solar arrays that are being proposed. There's also, as you'll see on the landscaping plan shortly, some additional woodland planting being proposed. And the other change on this application, which you probably can't see at this level of detail, is on the refused application, there was a 10-metre buffer with the ancient woodland between the development, whereas on this application with parcels 3 and 4, where the development adjoins the ancient woodland, and around here, there's now a 15-metre buffer. Looking at the PV modules themselves, you can see that these would face south, so they run in an east-west direction, facing south, as you can see here on the image. They would have they would have a maximum height of 2.73 metres, and at the lowest point would be 1 metre. And they would be designed as an anti-glare design, and this would be secured via condition. Across the site, there's additional equipment would be required to support the development, and this includes across the site 8 medium voltage power substations, so we can see that here. They are 12.2 by 2.4 metres, single storey in height. In parcel 4, there would also be 1 distribution network operator substation here, which is 7.5 by 3 metres in height, also single storey. There would be 1 private substation, which is 10 by 3 metres, and 1 spares containers, which was 12.2 by 2.4 metres. So all of these structures would be single storey. The development would be enclosed by 2 metre high deer fencing, and a number of CCTV posts and cameras are also proposed, which would measure a height of 2.8 metres along intervals of the proposed fencing. Just to pick up a point really in terms of what Essex Police have said, so they suggested that the deer fencing wouldn't provide adequate security, but obviously just wanted to mention that there's obviously a balance to be struck between crime prevention and the visual amenity. So a more robust fencing would likely be unacceptable in terms of the impact on the character and appearance of the rural area, and officers consider that the CCTV proposed would provide an acceptable and a standard approach to security for such similar solar voltaic applications. Here at the bottom of the slide, we can see a proposed satellite, which is to a height of 5 metres, on a base of 1.5 metres squared. This is located also within parcel 4. This satellite is required by the UK power networks, as it will allow them to communicate with their control systems. Turning to the landscape master plan, across the site, all hedgerows, existing hedgerows and woodlands would be retained. Along a stretch of 1,289 metres of existing hedgerow would be strengthened with additional planting, and a further 291 metres of new native hedgerow would be included, as each of these parcels would feature hedgerow boundaries, so new boundaries would be created between these internal parcels. Across the site, 0.3 hectares of new native woodland would be planted, with a further 0.5 hectares of shrub and tree planting. So in particular here, on parcel 5 where my cursor is, where there's been a reduction in solar arrays to address the previous reasons for refusal, this is where they would be putting the additional woodland planting. So the planting proposed is considered to assist in assimilating the development into the locality, and would also deliver measurable biodiversity net gain. At this stage, and as I've also already mentioned, the development would now propose a 15-metre buffer with this ancient woodland. This approach is welcomed and is supported by the Woodland Trust, the Council's ecologist and the tree officer. Just picking up on a point within the consultees section of the committee report, so at 7.3 it states that members will be updated on the comments from the council ecologist, but just to confirm, their comments were received prior to the drafting of the committee report, and their comments have been included in full within the commentary of discussion at 5.6 on the impact on ecology and biodiversity. But in summary, the council's ecologist had no objections, subject to conditions which are all included. Turning to glint and glare, this was obviously a matter of discussion on the refused application. So I've included this just to sort of explain that in a little bit more detail. So this image here shows a bald earth scenario. So if there was no landscaping at the site, what would the impact be from glint and glare? So we can see that the impact is related, obviously they face south, so that sort of has implications on which dwellings would be affected. So on this northern parcel, in a border scenario, it would only be possible for residential dwellings to the east on Hackmans Lane here to be affected, and the southern parcel, due to the orientation of the panels, the impact would only be impacting these dwellings to the west. So the application has been submitted again with the glint and glare assessment, and for this application the local planning authority have engaged independent consultants to review that glint and glare. So the conclusion for the applicants and the independent assessment is that due to the existing landscaping, which I will show you on some later slides, between these panels and the receptors, those residential receptors, would reduce the impact to none. So officers are content that in terms of glint and glare, there would be no unacceptable impact to neighbouring amenity. So just looking at some photographs here. Photograph A, which is the larger photo here, is across parcel 1. So where I've put the image, this is taken from the public right-of-way looking across parcel A, so that northern parcel. It shows the eastern boundary, so where my cursor is now on the location plan, it shows that existing tree and hedge boundary, and this shows that sort of same boundary in a bit more detail. These photos are both taken from the public right-of-way. So photo C is looking across parcel 3, so the ancient woodlands on your left-hand side here, and it shows sort of the existing agricultural nature of the site. And what you can see in the background here is the eastern boundary here, the existing line of tree and hedgerow. And again, this bottom photo, so photo D, is now looking south from the public right-of-way, and it shows the existing hedge boundary to plots parcels 3 and 4. Now I've included some photographs here of the public right-of-way, so E, so the public right-of-way, as I outlined earlier, runs to the eastern boundary along the entire length is a bridle way. So this photo on the left-hand side, where my cursor is showing the entrance into the public right-of-way. So you can see that actually it's tree and hedge lined on both sides, and again that's reflected in this aerial image here, so you can see the density of the existing planting that extends that boundary. And now I know these aren't ideal photographs here, but these are taken on that public right-of-way. So this photo, the first one, where my cursor is looking towards the application site. So this is where the new woodland planting would be, and then the panels. And the other photo, where my cursor is now, is looking back towards the properties on Hackmans Lane, including the crib. So you can just get a sense, there's the track there, and then you've got a good sort of, 2 metres, I would suggest, of sort of hedgerow and tree planting. So when you're looking at these photographs in terms of the impact on this neighbour and that glint and glare point, you've got this existing hedgerow, which is along here. You've got extensive hedgerow along the ancient woodland, and then you've also got this planting along here, which is what reduces that impact from glint and glare to none. In terms of the planning balance, the benefits relate to renewable energy. So the proposal is a renewable energy project, which in principle is supported by national and local policy. The proposal would generate up to 25 megawatts of renewable energy, and overall it's considered that the benefits of the electricity generated by the solar panels would carry significant weight. There would be employment opportunities by providing employment opportunities in the construction phase, with local businesses benefiting from short-term increase in demand. This is given limited weight in the overall planning balance, given that it is short-lived and a small quantity of jobs. There would be benefits in terms of biodiversity net gain. So the proposals indicate that a net increase of 65.27 in habitat creation. So that figure there, it's 65.27 in habitat creation, and an increase of 46.44 in hedgerow units. In addition, the development would secure further ecological connectivity across the site via the proposed hedgerows, trees and woodland planting. So this is assigned moderate weight in the planning balance. In terms of the adverse impacts, there would be some landscape harm. So the proposals would result in landscape and visual harm from the loss of the agricultural character and visual amenity. The most significant harm to visual receptors would be those walkers on the local networks of public rights of way that adjoin and cross the site. However, the overall impacts would be localised and would reduce as the proposed vegetation matures, and the site would return to its current state after the 40-year period. Limited weight is given to the harm in this planning balance. Additional harm would be attributed to the impacts on the public right-of-way. So part of the access track is classified as a public right-of-way. Whilst the use of this footpath is considered to be low, there may be some conflict between pedestrians and construction vehicles. However, there are conditions to be imposed to manage such potential conflicts via the construction traffic management plan, and any potential conflicts would be very occasional over a short period of time. The construction phase is a maximum of 24 weeks, and therefore only limited weight is assigned in the planning balance. And our recommendation this evening is that planning permission be granted subject to conditions set out. And that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, to speak, we have an objector, Mrs. Waugh, who'd like to come forward. Can we find a seat? Oh, thank you very much, Councillor Stamp. That's it. Make yourself comfortable. Please do use your microphone. The timer's ready. We'll begin it when you start to speak.
Good evening. I'm here on behalf of the families living next to the proposed site. We're grateful to see the conditions in the report, but there are critical points that have not been addressed. Even today, as this decision is made, we do not know how close this site will be to our homes. In 3.1.5, there's a mention of the removal of a handful of panels, but no measurements have been provided despite our requests. At last count, the site was just 130 metres from my house and 150 metres from the Warren, the Crib and other family homes. We've not been consulted on this development despite claims in the application which are false. Fire safety and the single access road to the site are major concerns for us. The Essex Fire Service has made clear that there must be at least 2 access routes to the site for it to be safe. This and other requirements have not been addressed, so we question how this can be considered to be satisfactory on page 24. In 5.2.13 and 5.7.2, key issues raised in the Woodland Trust's objection have not been included in the report. They raised concerns about the ancient woodland location and harm to irreplaceable habitats. We also question why the health impact assessment ignores the existence of our homes and the concerns that we've raised while referencing properties twice as far away. This is misleading. 5.2.17 refers to the significant harm that the development will pose to the public right-of-way. The beautiful open countryside views will be blocked off by the security fencing and CCTV surveillance that we've just seen on that screen. We support green energy projects. There are plenty of open areas where a development like this would be more suitable and cause less harm, away from people's homes, the public footpath and ancient woodlands. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have for the applicant, Mr. Howie. Again, please come forward. Same rules for you, Mr. Howie. We'll start the timer as soon as you start to speak.
Madam Chair, councillors, my name is Duncan Howie and I'm a Director of Anglo Renewables. This proposal is a resubmission of an application for the construction of a solar farm for the generation of renewable energy. Your officer has, for the second time, recommended this application for approval. We were here 8 months ago, and that application is currently at appeal. Since this application was last in front of you, government has increased its demand that planning committees must deliver renewable projects. The newly appointed Secretary of State for Energy and Security and Net Zero made a statement in the House of Commons on the 18th of July, and I quote, "Farmers want this. The National Farmers Union has supported this decision. Of course, we will work with local communities, but every time an opposition member gets up and opposes clean energy, they are saying to the British people, we are going to make you poorer. We are going to make Britain more energy insecure, and we are not going to tackle the climate crisis." In an effort to get this approved today, we have amended our plans and removed panels closest to the residential properties and increased the landscape mitigation provided. Following those alterations, your officers had an independent assessment of glint and glare impacts undertaken, and this report raises no concerns. In addition, your environmental health officer has raised no objection in relation to any noise impacts. In conclusion, this application is strongly supported by policy. It has no statutory consultee objections, and your planning officer has, in her professional judgment, concluded that this application should be approved. I hope all the benefits to you, the nation and the environment will bring you to that same conclusion and that you vote in favour of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Stamp.
Madam Chair, I don't know if the officers can actually address the points raised by the lady who took the time and trouble to sit there. I think that would be really quite nice before the debate moved on, so I'd recommend we do that. And then can I come back, because I have got some points most probably based on what the officers say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stevens?
It's okay, because Councillor Stamp just took the words out of my mouth, so that's completely fine. Thank you.
And I have Councillor Lagan.
Do you want the answers first? I think Councillor Stamp and Councillor Stevens are asking for the answers first, and then I can come in because it might negate some of the questions I'm going to ask.
Chairman, I think, so if I could just come back, I think what I couldn't work out from this report or from the plans, exactly how far these houses are away from the solar panels. That's the big question. And the other big question is, the applicant knew the members' concern last time, and I think it would have been really useful to have some CGIs so that we could understand how the solar panels impacted on these dwellings. This is what this was all about, but I'll give way.
Thank you. Yes, so in terms of the distance, so this plan here actually shows the crib. So this is where the residential properties are on Hackmans Lane. In terms of the distance to parcel 5 here, it's a minimum of 150 metres. Clearly, there's additional woodland planting being proposed, as I sort of outlined in the officer report. And actually, from the glint and glare, you can see that actually those units on this particular parcel wouldn't be affecting the properties to the northeast there. And there's adequate planting in terms of mitigation for any sort of impacts from outlook. A noise report's been submitted, so officers are content there wouldn't be any impact, adverse impact to neighbours' immunity from noise. In terms of the distance to this northern parcel, plot 1, it would be in excess of 30 metres from these properties. And again, we've seen that because of the existing landscape that's there wouldn't be any adverse impact from glint and glare from those. In terms of the comments made in relation to fire risk, this has been set out within the committee report, so 5.9.12 onwards, sort of sets out that fire risk has been considered. So yes, note that Essex Fire and Rescue Services have responded with a list of criteria to adhere to provide suitable access for fire engines. So that their comments do make reference to design guidance contained within the County Fire Authority's document. And again, note the concerns raised by third parties and consultees regarding sort of the singular access point. But this is a matter that would be further covered under building regulations and would be a matter for the County Fire Authority to advise on. So our view is that compensatory measures may be incorporated to overcome the need for a further access point. And you'll note that condition 27, which is recommended to be imposed on any approval, requires the submission of a management plan to demonstrate how the facility could be operated safely in this regard. So officers are satisfied that from a fire safety perspective, the proposal is acceptable in planning terms. Thank you.
Councillor Stamp.
Thank you. So listening to that, so what reassurance...
Sorry, could you use your microphone, please?
Sorry, Chair. So what reassurance can you actually give the members of the public that that is going to actually happen? Because I'm more concerned about detail further down the line, because I think we've all been caught out on certain things when we expect it as a planning committee that has been approved and it doesn't actually follow through. So I would have thought that's got to be legal from the fire engine's point of view, or the point you raised, the lady raised, that we can guarantee that will happen rather than mitigated against. So I am concerned about that. So whether we can actually make sure that is deliverable for a fire engine. I think Mr Johnson's going to come and reassure me in a minute. But I'm also, Madam Chair, would like to look at the planning balance summary and recommendations. And it says quite clearly about, you know, the planning balance on the public rights of way network on Purleigh 7, you give limited weight. And then further down it says about the footpaths are hardly used. Well, forgive me, but every committee I seem to be sitting on, we're talking about health and well-being, encouraging people to walk, connectivity. Let's get people, you know, out of their houses and walk on these public rights of way. And at the moment, I can't see that this committee or this council is actually giving weight to what we should be doing. Limited weight to me is not good enough when we actually should be trying to increase the health and well-being for our residents. So that's maybe a personal view, not a planning view, but I'd like reassurance that we can take that seriously going forward, because it's vital that we all are allowed to walk outside, and also make sure the hedges are cut back so we can actually do it. What I would say, Madam Chair, is that when they said about the construction being could come into collision with the members of the public, I would actually make sure that doesn't happen, because I know on the Marsh Road, and I've got pictures to justify this, when that development, I won't say the developer, was taking place, they closed the public right of way, but they didn't close it, and the dog and this dog walker and the person nearly got hit by the cement mixer that was entering the site. So I actually, where it says limited weight and you know, it might not be a problem, it honestly can be a problem, and as a council we need to make sure of that. I'm reassured that the distance of these panels are going to be away from the houses. I think we all understand that we need green energy, and I certainly am, for one, are going to support it. But I think it's a real shame that we're having to take over fields and fields when they should be put on our houses. Why are we not doing that? Why are we not pushing that forward for our own as our council to actually do it as standard? So all this farmland is not being used, or the beautiful countryside is being put for this sort of development, Madam Chair. So, well, there you go. So thank you. If we can just have some reassurance about what you've called limited weight, I do think we need to be not just limiting weight to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the questions. In terms of the public right of way, they're not to be obstructed, they're not to be diverted, so they would remain open and operational at all times throughout the construction phase, and thereafter, once the development is operational. There is a condition on there in terms of management of the public right of way and any conflict there might be with construction vehicles, so that would, you know, we're requiring the details of that to be agreed, signage should be imposed, banksmen, etc. So that would manage that over the construction period, which, as I said, is 24 weeks. So I guess at officer level, our view is that the weight to be attributed to that inconvenience during the construction phase, and thereafter the impact in terms of the enjoyment of walkers on those footpaths. I think that, you know, it's for you members to attribute how much weight you wish to assign to it. I think from our point of view, in terms of the landscaping that's being proposed and existing landscaping mitigation, our view is that we would assign limited weight to it. And that's just sort of how we've reached that conclusion. But obviously it's entirely up to members to assign how much weight they feel should be attributed to that issue. But we're not suggesting it's not harmful, it's just the weight to be applied to that harm.
Yes, before we go, can I just actually ask for a legal point of view? What's happening to the first appeal? Is the developer going to pull the appeal if this is approved, or what? Are we going to get into that situation where we've had before, where one supersedes another one and they still go for cost? So have we got any assurance from the developer? Has officers spoken to the developer about this new application, or what? Can you give the information to members and myself?
Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Stamp, there is a current appeal against the previous refusal. That is scheduled to be heard by way of a 3-day public inquiry in November. We have had extensive discussions with the applicant, not just in terms of the current application, but also in terms of how we can try to manage that appeal and hopefully to avert it. I don't want members to think that, which is why I wasn't quite sure about whether I should mention this or not. Yeah, I don't want members to feel that it's been discussed and it's a sense that, well, if this is not approved, then we may be faced with this appeal. But the fact is, discussions have been happening on. They have been very fruitful. We've also had engagement with the planning inspector in terms of that. The planning inspectorate are actually supportive of local authorities and appellants negotiating possibly an amicable way forward, to possibly avert any public inquiries and things of that sort of nature. So they have been supportive in that respect. But clearly, it will turn on any decision made. We can only go by the assurances that we have. All I know is that the discussions we've had have been very fruitful and have been very productive. It's not often we are in that position. And notwithstanding that, the applicant has submitted this application, making amendments to it, and that's as positive a situation as we can be in. The intention is that if this application is supported by members, subject to your feeling satisfied that the local residents' interests, the local environment interests have been sufficiently mitigated, and obviously having like to planning policy, national guidance, etc., that the appeal will go away. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Sorry, I've actually got Councillor Lagan next.
Thank you, Chair. There's just a couple of points. I mean, we're a little bit tied by national policy and our own local development plan with regard to approval or not, because it meets all of the requirements. Whether you personally like it or not is irrespective. It's down for policy. Things that I've picked up with the Boulder survey, I just wondered, it's a lovely set of photographs with lots of greenery on it. What happens in autumn and winter? Does that have any impact? So that doesn't change because we've said there's nothing there? So irrespective of any season, there is no glare?
Yeah, the assessment that's been undertaken would have assessed the impact throughout the year. So January, February, middle of the summer, the independent assessment we've had done suggests that the impact to neighbours would be none at any time.
So thank you for that. That clarifies that. Biodiversity net gain, my strange old brain can't measure that with development, but I look at it and go, return to its previous use in 40 years, but would that not be then designated as a brownfield site?
I'd be saying no. I mean, it's agricultural land at the moment, so it would just need to be reverting back to that. So there's a condition that covers that, that it would have to revert back to its former use.
I obviously won't be here in 40 years, but the problem we have is no one owns a view. That's a real heartbreaking issue that we've got on there. And it's a 24-week build plan. So do you know how many HGV movements and carbon emission that would actually take before we get the panels put in? And that's the last question I've got. Mrs. Page, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on that last point, that wouldn't be a matter that we would be able to give any information on at this stage. That could be subject to a number of parameters within the, developer's gift as to how that would be managed. What we do require through condition is that details regarding, as I can't remember what condition it is, that they would need to submit details of how the development will be managed in that sense. What condition is that?
Condition A is the construction traffic management plan.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Whiffen next.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just ask that distance again between the domestic properties and the site, and is that to the boundary or to the centre of the site?
Well, I'm saying it as a minimum because I think I'm being underestimating. So the crib here to this sort of these dwellings here with sort of the edge of the application site on this eastern boundary, I think would be in excess of 300. So I was sort of suggesting 300 because I think that's just being fair, that's the minimum, and not 300, I apologise. 150 metres to this parcel and it's 300 to here, so it would be to the edge of the application site. Obviously the panels themselves are inset from the boundary to account for the public right of way and the buffer with the existing landscape, so they're very much minimum.
Thank you. It's just I've had numerous discussions with both the applicant and the objector because this is my ward, and from Googling it today, it says the recommended distance for health-wise from solar panels should be between 200 and 500 metres. So I just wanted to check that that complies.
Yeah, in terms of, I think the committee report does address some of the health issues. I could just find that. It's under, apologies, 5.9.7. So I think we acknowledge that I think third parties have made concerns or raised concerns about health implications. But in terms of such solar array applications, there's no evidence to suggest that these result in harm to sort of health of residents. And as set out sort of earlier in the report, that there wouldn't be any adverse impacts from sort of noise, outlook, glint and glare. So I think from a health impacts, we are content that the development wouldn't be harmful to neighbouring amenity or health. The application has been supported by a health impact assessment, and that was updated for this application, which concludes that there wouldn't be any adverse impacts directly on health, mental health, well-being, and I think officers conclude with the with that summary position.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Just a point in terms of that as well. I mean, the applicant has submitted all the relevant, technical and statutory information in terms of health information. I can draw a conclusion in terms of telecommunication masts, yeah, where again there's concerns about health implications and so on, notwithstanding those operators submitting again all the technical informations and so on. So I'm just sort of stating that if I'm not saying members would be minded to go along that route, but unless one has, the relevant technical information that goes against what's effectively statutory requirements for any operators, whether it be for solar farms or telecommunication posts, it would be on very difficult grounds in terms of that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Stevens, Councillor Morley, Councillor Fluker, Councillor Morgan at the moment. Have I missed anyone? Councillor Driver. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. So we've heard that there's not going to be any, that there will be no glint and glare, but it's more than that, because just because something doesn't glint or glare at you doesn't make it pretty. I'm quite confused about the distance, because a few minutes ago I think we heard 30 metres and I've heard 150. Did I rightly hear 30 metres is the closest?
Sorry, yeah. So these dwellings here, where it's annotated the crib on the location plan, to this.
I'm sorry, I've got to interrupt you because I can't see what you're.
Can you see the cursor?
Sorry, where are you?
Can you? Where it says annotated with the crib, where my cursor's moving, can you see that there or not? It's to. How to describe that? The crib, which is annotated here, at the closest point to parcel 5 would be 150 metres as a minimum, and then to parcel 1, which is the northern parcel, it would be 300 metres.
Thank you. Okay, so 150 metres to the nearest bit of glass to the closest house. Okay, that's further than I thought, but I still say it's not just about glint and glare. If you can see, and I think you will be able to see in the winter, because there won't be all that pretty leafy stuff around and native planting won't be evergreen, 150 metres away, if you can see a field of glass, that's not going to be a good outlook for somebody. I'm not satisfied that we can just say, well, yeah, the health and safety says this, but actually we find otherwise. Oh, yeah, well, we should have 2 access routes for fire safety, but never mind, 1 will do. I'm not happy that we're saying, oh, well, there isn't another brownfield site of 33 hectares, which it says in the report, because, well, we're only looking at 33 hectares because that's the size of this site. If this site were 20 hectares, we'd say, oh, let's see if we can find a 20-hectare brownfield site. And I think brownfield site implies, and possibly legally means, a site that is no longer being used. Whereas I look at all the flat rooftops on factories in Heybridge and in my ward in Tolsbury, and I think that's a brownfield site. Now, it might be not that might not be the legal definition, but those rooftops aren't being looked at. And just before I finish, those are my points, but I just wanted to say one other thing. I'm saddened tonight by the tone of the developer's representative, because it implies that residents and members who are wary of this or have questions about it are just a nuisance. And actually, we're exercising our democratic right in this country to ask questions and to feel that something isn't suitable. Disagreeing with something, there's nothing wrong with that. People always will disagree about things. Saying to a resident that it's a threat to the nation, that there won't be enough power, I don't like that threatening and bullying behaviour, and I think developers can do better than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Councillor Lagan spoke to me as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Fluker.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think we've clarified this 30 metres, because I actually had 30 metres on written down, and I think it's really important to that. I mean, based on your opening comments, Chairman, I'm very surprised with what the officers have both said, because they've both alluded to the fact that it's up to members to decide how much weight they assign to things like loss of amenity. And we mustn't be railroaded by officers into this, that if we don't want to approve an application, then we can't, because that's very much what it sounded like tonight, and I know that's not supposed as it is. But members, through you, Chairman, I mean, it's the subjective matters of planning, not policy. That is where the weight of democratic input comes from, the knowledge of members, and appeals are one on such matters where members have gone along and they've given subjective, they've argued on subjective grounds and applications have been turned down. I mean, from my own perspective, I'm sure nobody in this chamber would want a solar farm within 150 metres of their house. If officers are saying that's acceptable on behalf of the local planning authority, and there is a subsequent impact on these residents' health, then they know who to go to. Because we are being advised as members that the officers are recommending approval on the basis of the information they've got. I didn't like the comments about appeal. Is it correct, Chairman, through you to Mr. Johnson, that the local planning authority has not been able to find an advocate to defend the appeal?
Thank you, Chairman. That is correct.
Chairman, there's something terribly wrong here, because, we've had this before, and I'm sure, Chairman, you'll remember this, particularly around Tinker's Hole, where we had private briefings before these meetings where these sort of things were explained. We need to revisit the way that these meetings are managed, Mr. Johnson, through you, Chairman, so that this information can be put in front of the members. But, Chairman, I don't believe, for various reasons, and I've read lots of stuff online about this, and I concur with the 150 and the 250, how far these things should be away from houses. I really don't think that this does protect the amenity and possibly the health of those residents who live close by. And it's for that reason, Chairman, I won't support this. And we've been told tonight that it's up to members how much weight to assign to the loss of amenity. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Driver.
I am quite concerned about where our discussion feels like it's heading. We're being presented with a site, and I understand that any site where you're going to have some development is going to cause some concern to those around it. A lot of us who are living with large housing developments on our doorsteps know exactly what big developments look like when they're just a few metres away, never mind 150 metres away. And the height of these panels, front 1 metre, rear 3 metres, is considerably less than the height of a house. If you go down the A14, as you go through Danbury and drop down, you will see on your right-hand side a large solar farm. Actually, as you go past it from the road, you can just about make out the first line of panels, because actually that's 3 metres. Everything behind you can't see, because actually they're covered, they're hidden effectively by the first row, and indeed some of the means by which they've sort of shielded some of that means that largely it disappears. So I recognise that anybody who has a development going onto a plot of land near them will raise some concerns, but it seems to me that you're not going to find anywhere where actually you can put a solar farm which is nowhere near any other property. We live in quite a densely populated land, so to try and find somewhere which is not close to any other property will be difficult. Just coming on to the health issue, I 2 years ago put 16 solar panels on my roof, as have neighbours. And indeed, one of the things that has been raised is, why are we having solar farms when we could put them on our roofs? Well, if they really are a health issue, then I would be very wary about suggesting we have solar panels on all our roofs. I've got them on my roof. I have read nothing, absolutely nothing, to suggest that solar panels in any shape or form, in and of themselves, causes any health issues at all. So I think the health issue, from my point of view, is a complete red herring. There is an issue here about the countryside, and that is a judgment. You know, we are putting a solar farm into the countryside, and that will impact on how that is viewed. And I understand that. Any development that goes into the countryside will have an impact. And I'll come back to this. We have been and agreeing to housing developments which I would argue have considerably more impact to their neighbours than this does. So I'm sorry that it does impact people who live close by, but close by is 150 metres, and 150 metres away from something that's 3 metres high really doesn't impact a great deal, I would argue. So personally, I will be voting in favour of this, and I find it difficult to see that we've really got strong grounds to do anything other than vote in favour. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Siddiq.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Councillor Driver's stolen a lot of my thunder, so I would reiterate what he said. Yeah, there can't be a health issue with solar panels because people stick them on their roofs, and we've had tonight an argument against this which says people should stick them on their roofs. So the fact that we've got solar panels 150, 300 metres away from our house, surely there isn't any health issues around that. There will always be a fact as in terms of development. I have a large business park in the next village to me, which I know my residents would rather not have. It causes pollution, it causes vibrations, it causes damage to our homes, but we cope with it. So the harm of a solar farm is not really that harmful in comparison to other situations. We've got to do this. As Mr. Johnson has already said tonight, we couldn't find anybody to defend the refusal. There wasn't good planning reasons. Those reasons that it was refused for last time around Glintingale have all been addressed in this new application, and that's what we're to bear in mind. So therefore I would recommend that we approve this application. Do I have a seconder, please?
Seconded by Councillor Driver. So that was the proposal. You proposed the officer's recommendation. Thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Morgan and then Councillor Stevens would like to come back. And Councillor Morgan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, really, it's sort of, I think much of this has been said, but I just really, through you, Chair, just would sort of invite the officers to suggest that if they were betting persons that they would actually be putting any money at all on the possibility of that appeal being won. And I suspect they wouldn't, in which case we would be faced with the situation of that appeal going against us, whereas we now have a situation where if we obviously pass this application, we would have a fresh application which actually is less intrusive to the people who live nearby. And yes, I mean, obviously solar panels are not pretty, but they're not meant to be pretty. But I would have to say that global warming is a darn sight more unpleasant than having a solar panel 150 metres away from you. So I would both reiterate and support Councillor Siddle's suggestion that we recommend this be passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stevens, would you like to come back?
Thank you. I think this will be my last question. I feel very torn about this, I really do. Could I just ask through you, Chair, when a resident 150 metres away is looking at this solar farm, in response to what Councillor Driver just said, are they looking at, because I haven't seen a sort of 3D image, are they looking at a rising bank of glass going up the hill? Or can they only see the end of the front one? Or how does it look from the side, please? Thank you.
Thank you, and that's a fair question. So the arrays themselves run in an east to west direction, obviously making account of the southern direction. So if you were within the property that we're talking about here to the crib, so that's to the northeast of this parcel that's been reduced in size, you'd be looking at the back end of the panels themselves. So you would be seeing this bit, the tallest part, but you wouldn't see the face of them. So here on the bottom, this is if you were standing on the south looking up towards them across the field, number 5, you would see, that's what you would see. But the elevation or the sighting of the neighbour wouldn't see that, they would see the back of them. So you wouldn't be a sheet of glass, as you put it, so you'd be looking at the back end of it.
Right, and if I can just sort of take that through then, so you're looking at the back of the first one, and then is the next one higher up than it, or does it go downhill, or how?
No,
how's
in terms of the site, so in the photographs, bear with me, parcel 4 and 5 would be on this, so you can see that it's relatively level. So no, there's no, the site's relatively level, so you wouldn't be seeing sort of, an elevation of mounting solar arrays. You would very much see here, well, I don't think you would see it because you've obviously got new proposed landscaping, you've got the extensive landscaping along the public right of way, that's quite extensive to this neighbouring field, then with this neighbour. So no, you wouldn't see a swathe of solar arrays. If you saw anything, you would be seeing the side of them and that rear elevation. So you wouldn't be seeing the area that's got the actual panel themselves on. If that's clear, sorry.
Yes, please.
I think. So again, just to put it into real world perspectives, we've talked about the topography of the land being fairly level to sloping from north to south. We're looking at structures which are less than 3 meters high. Councillor Driver, I'm sure, probably one of the tallest persons in this room, is probably at least 1.8 to maybe just under, maybe 2 meters. So we're looking at something which is maybe a meter taller than him. So let's put this thing into terms of perspective as to what one can see over a distance of 150 meters at its closest to 300 at its other closest. These are the real world situations. We're talking about dynamic environments. We're talking about environments which have vegetation, trees, screening. This is the realistic position. The properties themselves have their own boundaries. And these are the sorts of things that, you're not even going to be seeing the rear of this property, yeah? And again, just picking up on the point that Councillor Stevens made, you will just see the first, even if you were to see, and I doubt very much you would see from that distance, with all that intervening natural environmental obstructions, if you want to put it that way, you are unlikely to see anything. And these are the real world perspectives. that we need to also take into account in terms of the physical, visual impact on residential amenity. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Fittett, Councillor Morley, and then Councillor Fluker again. Councillor Fittett, please. Thank you, Chair. On 5 and 6, it says when first planting seasons following the occupation and when the landscape. Is there anything we can do to actually make sure that whatever is planted is actually mature and of a size that can, shall we say, fit the purpose? Because I mean, it might well be we end up with like root sticks put in or something like that, you know. So I'm just wondering what the planting scheme would be. Can we make it of a certain size or age or? Thank you.
Sorry, direct me to the, are you talking about a particular condition? Sorry.
5 and 6. And it's referring to really, I mean, from the resident's perspective, if it's going to be built, it wants to be covered up as much as possible. And there's, you know, things like, you know, if it's dead in 5 years, who actually monitors this? Is it the residents? Is it the members? Whom?
That's fine. Sorry, I think it's condition 3, isn't it, that addresses the soft landscaping works? It's on my committee report. But anyhow,
I've got it on 546.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant a particular condition number.
No, sorry, page 46.5 and 6.
Sorry, yeah, so there is a condition though, so it probably picks up what that says in the committee report about soft landscaping works. So that does. Condition 3, that's right. So. Page 84. So that requires the developer to come back to us in terms of agreeing sort of planting methods, plant protection, sizes, that sort of thing, together with details of the monitoring and maintenance of it. Sort of sets out sort of timescales for when that landscaping shall be implemented. And then also sets out that if any of that trees die within a 5-year period, then they're required to replace it. So there's that assurances from officers that one, we agree the landscaping, we agree the details of the sizes of trees, plants that go in, and there's that protection of it, long-term maintenance, and that if anything does die, there's the enforceability of that condition that it would be replaced.
Okay. May I come back to that? I understand that, but what we don't know is what the officers will agree to. You know, so in terms of size, would that be a 2-foot tree, a 3-foot tree, a 6-foot tree? I mean, that's the problem with the thing, is that we don't know what we're getting to it.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, the whole context of the landscaping on this particular site is that the landscaping, as well as adding to the amenity of this site, is to provide protection and enhanced screening. So landscaping scheme will be relative to that. I mean, they couldn't come with a little bunch of flowers, there and say that's satisfactory. That's not commensurate with the development that we have under consideration. If it was somebody's garden that we were considering a landscaping scheme, it would be relative to that. Yeah, this is relative to a site which is a commercial development. It's on a significant scale. Is to enhance and support existing green infrastructure, and also to provide some visual mitigation. So our assessment of any landscaping scheme that comes in with that will be on that basis. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Frankly, we're led to believe we're in a climate emergency. We're building homes that only run on electric cars. I don't think the power's got to come from somewhere. And even with electricity, there's always a downside to mining lithium. But if we're going to get rid of fossil fuel, meant to be shortly, I'm afraid we've got to use more power. And it's not going to come from burning gas or coal. So it's got to come from everything. And as Councillor Siddle said, it goes on plenty of roofs at no risk, as far as I know. So I should support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Fluker.
Thank you, Chairman. I look forward to Councillor Morley replacing his fleet with an electric skip wagons. But he's already. But Chairman, he's already said that I should declare an interest because I've got a Tesla. I mean, look, let's not get too carried away about this 5-year replanting thing, because that's just the first 5 years. We've got these issues with Barley Meadows and the other development in Southminster. The obligation was only to plant for 5 years. After that, if they die, there is no obligation to replace them. So we should be mindful of that, Chairman, and I'm rather hoping, like others, that I'll be the last one to speak. And that said, Chairman, I'm proposing a recorded vote. I think to those people over there, and I believe that will be seconded. Thank you.
We've actually got Councillor Stamp to follow.
Thank you, and you've actually stolen my thunder. I was going to back Councillor Fittock, and I was actually going to say, because Mr Johnson does know of instances where developers have been told they have to mitigate by planting, trees are not replaced, and what we're finding in our current LDP, that enforcements are still not being, developers are not being held to account because management companies have taken over and they're all dying. So what reassurance can this council give to the residents that they're not going to follow the same suit, that these trees are not going to mitigate? It's all right, the applicants saying they're going to adhere to it. We know at the moment, through sad experience, that they're not adhering to this. And to be honest with you, you go around some of these LDP sites that have been approved and you look at the state of their damn planting. They're dead, it's disgusting, and we as a council need to make sure that we don't pass a condition if we're not going to enforce it. So I'm just backing Councillor Fittock and sadly Councillor Fluker on this occasion. But thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Siddle Norman.
Thank you. I know a lot about this council and our district. I can give you about 4 examples of the fact our planning issues have been given things to do to replace trees over the years. I could give you a long list. In fact, one of the picked ones, 5 trees were cut down without permission. The residents around were absolutely upset, and it came to the planning said, you've got to replace them. They've never been replaced. And tell you why? Because we can't monitor to find out if they do. They never went back. That's 30 years. In my town, have put in trees. They're not watered. Every tree, although people say, okay, plant trees, they have to be looked after for 3 years. In fact, in Winchtree Road in Burnham, where I live, I organised 5 trees put in. I personally went back over and watered them with 3 buckets of water every day for a whole year, then 2 buckets in the next year and 1 in the next. And they survived. But the ones around the corner never ever did. Now we've got to decide really what's sensible. If in fact we make conditions, how are we going to monitor and make sure they happen? I don't know. I'm just asking all of you. We have really got to look at what happens after we make decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Driver.
In relation to the planting, which I entirely understand and absolutely agree with, however, we've just passed the first application this evening with a planting scheme and we didn't discuss it at all. It was just nodded through. So I just, I understand that there is a wider issue for us all about all the plans that we put in and the fact that planting schemes are not adhered to and they're ignored. And that is, a problem for all of us. But we've got to be consistent. I find it difficult that we're holding this one above the application that we had first time round when we just nodded through the planting scheme then. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
So while we're on consistency, I'm going to back Councillor Driver's point because I really understand everyone's concern. everybody knows I live a few metres from the North Haybridge Garden suburb, and a few years ago I saw 300-year oak trees ripped out of the ground, and I had the pleasure of being taken on the site and driving past the roots. My point is, backing councillor drivers, we don't worry about that, do we, when we pass other things here? And there are many people here. I'm just getting a little bit concerned with this application that we're making excuses. We're trying to find reasons why we can't pass this, that we don't apply to other applications. And I don't know why that's happening. Members are completely entitled to their view, but it seems to me we're quite set against that. And some of the councillors I see supporting other applications that I wouldn't support, so with regard to housing, tonight seem really opposed to this. And I don't understand why that is. I understand that people are concerned. I understand that they're worried about loss of amenity close to their own homes. I fully appreciate that, but I think we must be consistent. And I completely understand the point with regard to trees. I've seen hedgerows ripped out and not satisfactorily replaced. But that's down to us to make sure that those conditions are enforced. That's not part of the reason for turning down a planning application. So I think we are getting carried away. I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Councillor Siddle-Norman, would you like to come back? Can I come back? Yes.
I'm not against this. I'm just saying, we've got to accept that when we make decisions, we've got to find out how we're going to deal with it. I'm not against it. In fact, I would say that I'm probably more for it than anybody else. But however, I am tired. I'm a very elderly lady and I've been through a lot of councils, and I'm tired of being told by our residents that we talk a lot, but we don't actually go back and act on our talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, members, I believe I've got to the end of my list. We do, in fact, already have a proposal on the table, duly seconded, which is to accept the officer recommendation. So I'm going to put that to the vote. Those in favour, please.
Chairman, with respect, there's been a recorded vote called for.
Oh, that recorded
Yes,
vote,
so
yes.
seconded,
Sorry, that was
proposed by
seconded.
myself, and I think
Right,
seconded
sorry,
by
I apologise. Ms Bird? Are you set up for a recorded vote?
Yes, of course, no problem.
Right, so
Okay,
off you go. Thank you.
Thank you, members. So the proposal was for approval. So if you could indicate for, against, or abstain, please, when I call your name. Starting with Councillor Bassinger, please.
For.
Councillor Bell.
Abstain.
Councillor Burwood.
For.
Councillor Driver.
For.
Councillor Fittock. For. Sorry, Councillor Fittock.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Fittock.
Sorry, Mr.
I don't know if you need to use your mic because I can't hear you at once.
I can hear you, Mr. Bell, and I think we called my name with the evidence.
Was that for Councillor Fittock then?
No, that's against.
Yeah, sorry, apologies. Councillor Hughes.
Do not hear.
Councillor Jennings.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
For, please, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Lay.
For.
Councillor Morgan.
For.
Councillor Morley.
For.
Councillor Neal.
Abstain.
Councillor Pratt.
For.
Councillor Shaughnessy.
For.
Councillor Siddle.
For.
Councillor Siddle-Norman.
She said for.
Sorry, thank you. Councillor Spenceley.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
For.
Councillor Stevens.
For.
Councillor Stilts.
For.
Councillor Swindle.
For.
Councillor Thompson.
For.
Councillor Whiffin.
Abstain.
Thank you, Chairman. So the results of that are 19 for, 1 against and 3 abstentions. Thank you.
Thank you. So, members, that application is passed. Item 7 is any other items of business the chairman of the committee decides are urgent. You'll be pleased to hear there are none. So with thanks to officers and members of the public, I close the meeting at 9:18.